South China Sea, a key global hotspot, saw a tense encounter recently when a Chinese fighter jet flew dangerously close to a U.S. reconnaissance craft conducting a routine mission over international waters. So, what happened? A U.S. Air Force RC-135 was flying a recon surveillance mission over the South China Sea in an effort by the U.S. to track military activity worldwide. This area is a tension flashpoint between China and other countries, especially since China has laid claim to the entire region. The U.S. reconnaissance plane maneuvered into international airspace, deep into international waters far from China's borders. The aircraft was unarmed and there to collect information on the region's military activities. Unfortunately, whenever the U.S. conducts these operations in the South China Sea, Chinese military forces, particularly the People's Liberation Army Air Force, routinely intercept these recon flights to show control over the area. The RC-135's crew were busy with their regular monitoring duties when suddenly an object showed up on their radar. In moments, a Chinese J-11 fighter jet was in plain view of the U.S. aircraft. Flying dangerously close, just 20 feet away from the U.S. plane, the Chinese jet performed a series of aggressive maneuvers, a sharp turn, and a very close pass. This was no innocent flyby. The Chinese jet was deliberately positioning itself in a manner that could have led to a possible collision. The pilots on board the RC-135 were forced to react immediately and carefully adjust their flight path to avert disaster. While the Chinese aircraft made no contact with the American aircraft, their proximity and high-speed maneuvering put them in a situation that was dangerous to all involved. Any small mistake in those moments by either the Chinese pilot or the U.S. crew could have had catastrophic results. If the maneuver had been more aggressive, or if the systems of either aircraft had failed, the collision would have been unavoidable, destroying both craft and causing a diplomatic crisis. As the U.S. aircraft cleared the course of the Chinese jet, the crew continued their mission. However, the incident was not simply forgotten. This was serious, not an ordinary close call. The U.S. military immediately readied a formal statement condemning the actions of the Chinese jet as unsafe and unprofessional. U.S. officials emphasized in the statement that such maneuvers in international airspace not only endanger people within both aircraft, but also increase the chance of an international conflict. The U.S. government warned China to stick to international agreements governing airspace safety. The country reminded China of the rights that the United States had to perform reconnaissance missions in international airspace. The U.S. also undertook the diplomatic step of formally protesting unsafe actions on the part of the Chinese pilot through re-established channels between the two countries. China, however, was not going to sit back quietly. The Chinese Ministry of Defense justified the actions of its pilot by saying that the United States plane had deliberately intruded into China's military training area. They claimed that the interception was to protect China's sovereignty, and an end must be called to such reconnaissance of the U.S. near China's control zones. According to China, these flight activities threaten security and interfere with national defense undertakings. This incident is not at all an isolated one. The South China Sea is an area of overlapping territorial claims, and China has almost laid exclusive control over the entire body of water through its inherently controversial 9-dash line. Although international courts have dismissed this claim, China has been militarizing the region by building artificial islands over these newly constructed airstrips, along with missile defense systems and radar stations. For the United States, the main focus is freedom of navigation and reconnaissance missions in international airspace. And carrying out the surveillance, the U.S. will be able to spot any emerging Chinese activities and will be able to ensure that international waters remain free for all to pass through. Such missions, however, are provocative as per China. As an emerging global power, it considers itself entitled to dictate terms in what it calls China's backyard. Thus, any entry into the area by a U.S. military aircraft is construed as a challenge to its territorial claims and its sovereignty. The increased intercepts and close calls have shaped this region into a hotspot for international military tension from both countries. To make matters worse, both countries have nuclear armaments and rather large egos, so any potential conflict has the ability to grow quickly out of control. The training and professionalism of the U.S. pilots prevented the incident from escalating into something worse. The U.S. Air Force and the People's Liberation Army Air Force have established strict protocols for dealing with such incidents. Pilots are trained to determine the right and timely response for most situations, and such practice avoids actions that usually trigger an escalation. In this incident, the U.S. crew stayed calm under pressure, applied their training, and kept the aircraft under control during the encounter. The Chinese pilot, however, maneuvered deliberately to show the importance that China places on its territory and its sovereignty. Both the US and China are now heavily investing in cutting-edge military technologies, such as AI-enabled threat detection, stealth aircraft, and hypersonic missiles. This tech is designed to provide countries with a military advantage while aiding in reducing their risk potential in close encounters. For instance, the U.S. military has developed the F-35 fighter jet, which employs advanced radar and stealth capability, rendering aircraft detection difficult. The J-20 is one of the advanced Chinese fighter jets with flying capabilities that could challenge U.S. supremacy over the skies. This increasing dependence on these advanced technologies means that the survival of mid-air collisions will rest greatly upon communication, operational awareness, and technological savvy of the military forces from both nations. December 2022 showcased how close a Chinese fighter jet came to colliding with U.S. recon aircraft, marking a new ground for the fragile military interactions that happen in such contested areas as the South China Sea. With both Washington and Beijing continuing to stake their claims and push military presence in that specific area, we shouldn't be surprised that the rest of the world watches as a potential conflict has implications that go beyond the immediate parties. They determine global stability and regional security, as well as the balance